Woo! Hello. Welcome to the World Healing Tour podcast, where our mission is to help you heal yourself so you can heal the world. Hi, my name is Noah Crane. Each week, we will bring you tips and tools and inspire you to live your most empowered and joyful life. I'm also the founder of the 3G Effect, a daily practice to keep you heart centered in everything you do with a positive mindset and a positive attitude by practicing three important elements. Element number one, every day remember to have a grateful heart and connect to your gratitude. When you have a grateful heart, you're connecting to positive feelings and positive emotions, and therefore drawing more positive people, things, and experiences into your life. Element number two, every day remember to ground in love and compassion, to ground in who you are, to believe in yourself, to love yourself, to learn to stop judging yourself, to forgive yourself, to accept yourself just the way you are, and give yourself love and compassion and empathy. When you're able to do that for yourself, you therefore want to share that love and empathy and compassion with others. We all want more love and compassion in our lives, right? So why aren't we just freely giving it out to everyone else? When you give out more love and compassion in the world, you will get an abundance of love and compassion in return. And element number three, every day, know that you are not alone. You are rather guided by God. So God, universe, source, higher power, whatever you want to call it, I call it God. Just remember, God created you, so God's inside you. God is beside you. God is all around you. Open your heart and soul to God. Have trust and faith in yourself and trust and faith in your journey. You do that by learning to turn off the noise of the outside world and the noise of other and learning to just be a better listener. God will send you messages and messengers just for you to help guide you on this journey. My whole life has been guided by God. That's why I'm in all those three things that have completely changed my life. I've been able, therefore, to write my book that's right behind me. I've been able, the grass is greenest where I am, which, because it is. I've been able to find my soulmate, who I've been married to for over 27 years. I've been able to create big events and even be here with you today. This was a lot of self-work that I did to be able to be here. And it's a guided journey. We all are here to be able to be guided on our own journey. And there are many paths to Rome. That's why that's heal yourself, heal the world. Because when we heal ourselves, everything and anything is possible in our lives because we believe in ourselves. Well, today we're going to be talking about a very important subject, and I'm extremely excited. We're going to be talking about relationships, right? Because I believe relationships are the foundation to everything in our lives, and everything that we have, everything that we become, we grow through relationships. Whether it starts from our very first relationship in this life when we're born, with the relationship with our parents, with our mom, with our dad. So my guest today is amazing. Her name is Deanna Pelley. She's a licensed professional clinical counselor for over 8 years. And she says something that's really beautiful. She says she believes humans are created for relationships with ourselves and one another. In hurtful relationships, the path of healing can also be found through healing relationships. Deanna Pelley, welcome to the World Healing Tour podcast.
Hey Noah, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. It's so exciting that we get to do this and have this conversation. I love talking about relationships. I believe strongly in them. It's the backbone of my work as a therapist, and so I'm really excited to be here to talk with you today.
I am so excited too. And the more we talk, the more I realize, like, wow, I really know so much about relationships, and they have really shaped who I am today. So I was thinking, why don't we start with the very basic beginning of our relationships with our parents? Why are those relationships so important to our success, to our well-being, to who we get to become?
Yeah, I love talking about relationship with parents. It's actually one of the things I talk about with so much in my work as a therapist. I'm in private practice, And I understand, I work with a lot of adults and some adolescents, but the way I usually best understand the adolescent or adult who sits in front of me is by thinking about their early relationships with their parents. When we come into this world, babies absorb everything around them nonstop. It's constantly happening. They're taking things in. And from the moment you're born, you're building a relationship with your family, your primary caregivers, however that looks for you. And when we do that, we learn how to interact by interacting with the adults and caregivers who are interacting with us. I think this is one of the things that's so critical when we become adults. As much of how we've learned how to interact with other people, how to be in relationship, is how we learned how to do so when we were children and when we were developing. One of my favorite psychologists who I've read his book and hope to do an advanced training with him will say that we need the mind of another to grow our own mind. And I love thinking about that. And it makes so much sense when you're an infant and you come into the world, you can't learn to read or to write or to do math or even walking without actually that becomes modeled to you, it's taught to you, all of those things. That's how we use the mind of another, the mind of someone else who maybe knows what they're doing when it comes to like learning how to spell or to read or to write. And that helps us then grow our own mind because we learn those things as well. And so these I think of family units as like this little culture in and of itself that we grow up in. When I think about my own family and what the kind of way we tease each other or that we laugh about things or the way we have fun, it's kind of not solely unique to our family, but we do have a language in which we communicate and an understanding of each other that's not spoken but just known that comes from our own family. It's so important to understand how we grew up, what we learned when we grew up, how we interacted with our family, certainly our parents, siblings, other influential people in our lives growing up, because that will then shape the adult that we wind up becoming.
Definitely. And yes, and that those first relationships are really, like you said, they're so crucial. They shape who we are, right? It's that
Hmm.
even unspoken language that you were talking about, that we can communicate with each other, we know each other. Unfortunately, we know that there's a lot of trauma in those first relationships,
Hmm.
right? A lot of trauma that gets passed on generationally from one
Yeah.
generation to the next, in
Hmm.
relationships. Why
Hmm.
why are relationships so hurtful at times?
I think relationships can be hurtful for lots of reasons. And I think the word that's kind of the clinical word that I'll use sometimes in my practice is misattunement. In particular, when we're young, it's really important actually that we have adults and caregivers who are attuned to our needs and to what's going on. And sometimes that doesn't happen. Actually, that doesn't happen a lot of times. For many of us, it hasn't happened. In order to be, if you're a parent, in order to be attuned to your child, you have to be able to connect with what they're feeling, and in any given moment, even if we take like a toddler, toddlers get really mad sometimes when they can't have something that they want. That's actually, when you think about it, a really painful human experience when you can't have something that you want. Sometimes that can be really hurtful. As parents or as caregivers, we might look at a toddler and think, no, of course you can't have that whatever dessert that you want after you just had dessert. It makes so much sense. And I think what happens is parents and caregivers, and we've all done this. I used to babysit and I did this, where you come at it with logic and we're like, well, logically, you already had dessert. You said you wanted the chocolate ice cream. You don't get to have the vanilla ice cream too. You can't have both because you already finished the chocolate. Well, the toddler's really devastated, and we're like, "But you can't have both. Logically, you can't have both." But I think what happens, and when we're most attuned, and when it helps to heal the kind of just thinking about like relational trauma and so forth, when we can be attuned to the disappointment and the hurt that someone is experiencing that feels very real to them, I think that's where a lot of healing takes place, and that's also where, generationally speaking, we haven't done a really great job.
Hmm.
one of the things I like to tell people is that you don't have to have the exact same experience they have had in order to be able to connect to the feeling that they're having that's very real for them.
Oh, I
Um,
love that you said that.
mhm.
So what comes up to me when you say that is having empathy for the other person.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. I That's what I think. Like, even, like fear. Fear is an emotion that's very real. This isn't a perfect example. What I can tell you, Noah, is that I'm terrified of heights. I like I think the closest I ever got to the edge of the Grand Canyon when I went to visit was, I don't know, maybe 20 feet or something. I was pretty far back, and that's like, that was a pretty big deal for me. Someone else around there were other people who didn't seem to be afraid of heights. They seem to be doing just fine. But I bet they have other places in their life where they do feel afraid. And that's what I try to remember when I think about, certainly in my practice and with other friends and family, and having empathy, is that I may not feel the exact same way they do about something, but I know that I felt the emotion they're feeling before, even if it's not about the same thing.
Why do you think empathy is such a hard thing to give other people? Because it's almost like, I have a friend who always says, like, the way she sees people, like if they can't do something, she's like, put your big girl pants on, and just do it. And it's like, it lacks the
Mhm,
empathy, right? Why
mhm,
is it that we lack so much empathy? Like, we want empathy, but we so lack
mhm,
giving it to others. We want compassion, but we so lack
mhm.
giving it to others. What's the disconnect there, do you think? Because there's a disconnect.
There's a huge disconnect. I think part of it is that when we think about empathy, empathy requires us to be present in a feeling with someone. It's not about offering a solution. It's not about trying to get the feeling to go away, but actually making space for the reality that the feeling exists.
Oh, I love that.
Um,
I love that.
yeah.
I just wanted to say, like, I
Hmm.
had to say something, like
Yeah.
being present to the feeling they're having in that moment. So
Hmm.
you basically have to be so present in that moment with
Hmm.
them. Almost what I got in my head when you said that was almost picture yourself holding their hand in that moment.
Yes. Actually, yes.
Hmm.
Yes. Um, Recently, this was probably maybe 6 or 7 months ago now, I have a good friend of mine from college. We've been friends for a long, long time, and she had, had to have some medical tests. There were some kind of scary things going on with her, and she was, like, really afraid. Um, and she texted me one day, she was gonna be having, an MRI that day. I texted her, I asked how she was feeling about it, and she responded and she said, "I'm scared." And there was a part of me that really wanted to to respond and just be like, "Well, it's going to be okay." But actually, I didn't know that, and if I had said that, I think that would have missed the mark. She said to me, "I'm scared," and I responded and I said, "Me too." And I said, "I love you and let me know what happens. Like, I want to know as soon as you hear what's going on," because I was afraid. Actually, I was afraid for her. Um,
Yeah,
and that's a hard emotion to connect to. It didn't feel good, but it was true.
yeah, and I know what you're saying when you say that, like, I'm scared too. It's almost like you're validating how she feels, and
Yeah.
you're giving her like almost like a soft place to kind of lay down. Like, it's
Mhm.
okay, it's gonna be okay, but I'm worried about you too. Like, you're kind of
Mhm.
validating what she's feeling in that moment. And I think
Mhm.
that's maybe what's missing too is the validation when people are
Yeah.
feeling a certain way, are we validating their feelings?
Mhm. Yeah, and it was a real feeling, like, there was a reason for the fear, and it was very true, and there's always a reason for any emotion that we feel. Sometimes I'll have people come in particular as a therapist in my practice, I'll have people come in and they'll be like, "Well, I was really anxious for, whatever, and I had no reason to be anxious, but I was anxious." Or whatever they'll say, "I was sad, I had no reason to be, but I felt sad that day." And actually, I don't think we ever feel anything for no reason at all. Like, if I think about the times in my life where I've been excited, like jumping out of my skin, so excited, there's always a reason for it. I'm never excited for no reason. Um, and and the same with like when I feel fear or when I feel sadness, there's a reason for it. I may not be fully consciously aware, but there's a reason for it.
Yeah, I love that. And But we don't you think that we have to learn to not always live in our feelings? Like feelings, they come and go,
Mhm.
and they're a good gauge to see where we're at. But
Yeah.
a lot of us are very emotional. I'm one of them. I'm a very emotional
Mhm.
person. And so a lot of times my feelings can stop me from doing things I
Mhm.
need to do because I'm like, I feel this way or I feel this way. And I just think there's some real power in feeling things, but not letting them control who you are in that moment.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that that's a big thing. I think what many of us I think the challenge that we face with that is that a lot of us weren't actually really taught feelings very well as kids. Um, I've listened a lot to a lot of the things that I don't know if you're familiar with her, Dr. Becky Kennedy. She has the Good Inside podcast and several other things. And she will talk a lot about this. Like I'm thinking like my childhood and I think my parents absolutely did their best and parented me in a way that probably many people um, were parented in my generation. Certainly, I'm a millennial. When I was having a big feeling, when I was in trouble or something like that, I got sent to like timeout, or the goal was that I calm down, and that I not be screaming anymore. Right? And as a parent, you don't want your kid to scream, obviously. But I think what happens is like if we take adults, for example, my closest relationship in my life and my best friend is my sister. When I have a really rough day, and I'm feeling really upset, and I've called her crying before, she said to me, Deanna, I need you to go and I need you to go calm down. And then I want you to call me back when you're feeling better. I would experience that as really hurtful. And yet, I actually think that's what many of us were kind of required to do as children. And so we didn't really learn how to manage our feelings, how to work through them, how to cope with them. Instead, what we were taught was how to not have them, but you can't not have them. And that's one thing as a therapist, I wish I could get the whole world to understand, which is that we're not going to go through life without feeling hard feelings at some point. So we have to figure out how to recognize that they're there, acknowledge them, give them a space. And that actually allows so much room to move through them.
So I love that your sister and you are she's your best friend.
Hmm.
I think that's really,
Yeah.
really beautiful to have that kind of relationship
Yeah.
with significant other, like
Hmm.
a family member in your life. It's beautiful. I
Hmm.
wanted to, can you say that quote that, do you have that in front of you that we talked about? One of your favorite
Yeah.
quotes? Go ahead.
Yeah. So I wrote it down. I actually went online and I wrote it down so I make sure I get it exactly right. So this is Dr. Roy Barsness, who's the head of the Contemporary Psychoanalytic Institute in Seattle. It says, we hold to an understanding that we are conceived in relationship, formed in relationship, harmed in relationship, and transformed through relationship. And I love that quote. It just speaks so deeply to me.
Yeah, I love the heal in relationships, and
Yes.
unfortunately, a lot of us are harmed in relationship.
Mhm.
And, let's talk a little bit about love relationships, right? Because I feel like that's a
Yes.
really big topic of relationships.
Hmm.
Because I have a friend right now that's going through a heartbreak,
Hmm.
and the expectations we have in certain relationships, we have expectations of sometimes of future, of marriage, of long
Hmm.
term, and then when they don't work out, it's really hard, and going through that heartbreak is not easy. I know
Hmm.
I've been through it. I'm sure we've all been through it. Why do you think people are so heartbroken through relationships, and how can they be healed? Is there a formula to healing through the heartbreak?
Mm. I think that we're so heartbroken through relationship because we really need relationship. In every context in our life, and relationship is happening in many and varied facets in our lives. We need that, and we're really, I think, wired for relationship, especially like a secure attachment relationship. I'm not sure how much you've thought or looked into attachment theory, and I don't want to get too monologue here, but John Bowlby's the founder of attachment theory, and the whole premise is that we need ideally we need to be born into a safe and raised in a safe, secure attachment, something that feels very healthy and good. Unfortunately, for most of us, that doesn't actually wind up happening. And then when we get to partner relationships in particular, and we need those relationships to feel secure, we can feel really anxious or we can feel really like we have a hard time attaching to other people, even though we want to. I read something online. It was Todd Bartz, I think he's on Instagram. He's a therapist, I think on the East Coast. And he said romantic relationships like trigger everybody. And they do, actually. It's so true. I think we feel like, especially in partnership, romantic partnership, that we have a lot to lose in the same way that we have a lot to gain. But it's something that we really want. And tied and connected very closely in romantic relationships is the possibility for rejection. And of the things that we can feel in life, I think three of the worst are grief, shame, and rejection.
Well, rejection
You
is,
know,
is a huge one for, I think, for most people, right?
yeah.
I actually
Mhm.
have a chapter in my book that's called The Gift of Rejection, right? Because I've gotten
Mhm.
rejection so many times in my life that I actually had
Mhm.
to, make it into a gift because I really believe everything happens for your higher good and for your higher purpose, And we may
Yeah.
not see it right now, but when I learned to just accept rejection rather than like try to like fight it all the time, that completely
Mhm.
transformed how I saw it. Not that it didn't,
Mhm.
it still hurt me a little bit. Of course, it hurts, right? But it gave
Yes.
me a tool of acceptance. And
Mhm.
how they say, when you resist, whatever you resist persists, So that
Mhm.
acceptance gave me a place where I didn't resist it anymore. And not resisting it made me be able to move forward easier, more easier.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and rejection's a part of life. Like we're going to experience it somewhere along the line. Whether you're rejected from a job, rejected in a dating context or whatever, it is something that is going to happen and it is really hard and you're right there's actually so much growth that can come by way of rejection. And that I think some people get to experience and some people don't wind up experiencing that growth. It depends on where people are at in their journey and kind of where they can self-reflect in various things, but rejection is a huge part of relationship and it's a hard thing. It can feel risky, I think, for people, and for some people that risk can feel greater than others or more prominent even than others.
Yeah, I really believe now when I get rejection from people, I'm like, oh, thank you. Like, I really feel like, because I used to be like, Diona, like, I would meet somebody and I'd be like, oh my God, like, she's so cool. Like, I would love to be friends with her. Like,
Mhm,
the way she carries herself, the way she dressed, she just looks so cool to me, right? And then if she didn't want to be my friend, I'd be like, oh, like hurt. And I
mhm.
think by
Yeah.
learning to accept the rejection, like God just doesn't want me to, like the right people, like you connect with, and the wrong people
Mhm,
for a reason that we can't even see right now, which will,
mhm,
or we'll never see maybe. But having that
mhm,
trust, right? Trusting that everything's happening in this life to help you for your greater good, not to hurt you or to,
mhm.
or to be an obstacle in your life. It's here to actually serve you. If we could see life as serving us instead of trying to take us down, wouldn't that kind of like shift things for people and their relationship with how they see things?
I think yeah, that is a huge thing. I think that's such an important thing. I think how we view the world a lot of times I think is how we internalize the world as kids. Some people internalize it as good, some people internalize it as bad. Same with relationships. Like we can internalize the things that happen around us as good or bad. And so for people who are able to kind of internalize the world as a safe space and as a good thing, I think it kind of sets them up inherently for a really good um uh I'm trying to think of the right word to use here. Noah, this is like that
A
boomerang thing
good,
I
a
talked to you
good,
about
a good,
earlier.
a good path, or
Yeah, like a good path and like a little bit more safety and security. I think sometimes that can also breed a different level of confidence for some people. Whereas I think when we internalize the world as bad or as unsafe, especially with trauma and that sort of thing, um, the you can actually that can be changed, but it requires working through the trauma, and it's an important thing to do that. I wish, as a therapist, I wish everyone would get therapy. I mean, I think it's so valuable. I've done over 10 years of my own therapy. It's so incredibly valuable because sometimes I think when we internalize the world as bad, we actually aren't aware of it. Some people, there's a lot of stuff that resides in the unconscious. And so if we can make those things conscious and realize how we view the world around us and how we interact with people, then we're able to change so much, I think, and really set ourselves on a different path. And it's so healing focused.
Yeah, absolutely. I really believe that it's how we see life is how life shows up. Like we really do
Hmm.
create our world, with our words, with how we see things from our past, and it's that conditioning sometimes from our past, as you're talking about, that keeps us from being fully expressed in the world. And when you're in relationships, any kind of relationships, whether it's, you're connecting with a friend, whatever it is, those relationships help you really become who you are. They help you flourish. They say, you heard
Hmm.
the quote before, you are the sum of the five people that are like you're closest to. So
Yeah.
I just believe the right relationships really shape who we are in the world. Even if we, and what I love about relationships the most, I want to tell you this, is that,
Hmm.
when I meet somebody and if they're seeing my beauty, if they're
Hmm.
seeing my beauty, even if I can't see it in that moment, they get to mirror that for me. So what I get a lot from a relationship is that
Hmm.
mirror from other people, about my own, about who I am, even when I can't see it.
Hmm.
Even if I'm going through a hard time, somebody else can mirror my beauty to me just by who they are. And that's what I love a lot about it, is that we get to be that mirror, constant mirror for each other,
Hmm.
which relationships are priceless in that field to me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think, um, one of the things I think about a lot, and certainly in my clinical practice, is like the voices that are in our mind, the things that we tell ourselves. We are not born into this world with a negative internal dialogue. When we do have a negative internal dialogue, when we're really self-critical and that sort of thing, that was something that was generally told to us that we then internalized as truth about ourselves. And I've had to wrestle with my own negative internal dialogue and really work on where that dialogue came from, why I internalized it as my own, and be aware of when it creeps in. And what I have to do then, and like what feels so important to me, is in the dark, the worst ways I view myself sometimes, that is not how the people that love me view me. My closest friends, family, my sister in particular, when I'm feeling really hard and critical on myself, what I have to remember is what their voice would say. When I need something that feels hard to generate in myself because I'm feeling particularly hard on myself for whatever reason. And sometimes we have to, like relationally speaking, we have to remind ourselves that other people can see us different than we see us, especially when we're feeling really hard on ourselves. Or sometimes other people hold a hope that we have a hard time like grasping onto ourselves or similar things.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I just think that's one of the things that's so powerful in relationships.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because we judge ourselves. We're so hard on ourselves, right? We judge
Hmm.
ourselves, we judge others, we judge circumstances. So we're always judging, right? Situations,
Hmm.
circumstances, what's going on. So the judge is just so strong. I know in me it's really strong. And so
Hmm.
that can really hurt us, because if we're judging ourselves and taking ourselves down constantly, it's not, like you said, how other people see us, but it's how we like to beat ourselves up, right? And
Yeah.
so I, like, when my friends send me messages on the phone and tell me like, oh, I love you, Noah, like you're so great and all that, like I love who you are and I'm so grateful for your friendship, like I keep those messages on my phone, so if I'm ever down I can literally replay them because they leave me voice messages. And that's a great way to just kind of, because we need to fill our cup. I think that's part of it, is that relationships, they fill our cup, right? We get to almost like
Hmm.
pour into each other's cups. So every time you're in a positive relationship with someone, you're literally pouring water into their cup. They're literally pouring water into your cup. And it's that
Hmm.
beautiful exchange that keeps your cup full, that gives you the energy to continue going out every day and being who you are, who you're meant to be, and to be able to see your greatness, your own greatness. And
Hmm.
nobody, and knowing that nobody defines us, right? It's that self-work again, going back to that self-work that you're talking about. We have to
Hmm.
learn to find that peace within ourselves so we can be a source of peace for the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that about like the pouring back and forth too, and each other. Relationships are so there's like this beautiful energy and currency that transpires relationally that's so enormous in terms of like healing and pouring into people's cups and like really lifting people up. Sometimes it's so hard to see. And like my mom always used that phrase, like seeing the forest through the trees, I think is the one. Sometimes it's hard to see that, and we need someone else that can help us have that perspective when we can't have it for ourselves, which is just so valuable.
Yeah, and then let's talk about like eliminating the wrong relationships because so
Hmm.
many of us are in long relationships for way too long, right? And
Hmm.
I always say, elimination is the key to all we want in our lives, So the more we can, whether you want to say delete, eliminate, whatever it is, the
Hmm.
wrong people out of your life, the more doors will open and the more the right people will come in. But you can't be, a lot of us, we come from fear. And so we're afraid to eliminate something because we're used to it. It's comfortable. Growth happens in the uncomfortable. Really good relationships, they don't happen at you sitting at home, right, behind your computer. Usually they happen when you go out into the
Hmm.
world and you meet people, and this person introduces you to this person. That's how we got together, right? So
Hmm.
being able to open those new doors, right, and not being
Hmm.
afraid, that's where the magic happens. That's where you create new relationships, and where you could let the old relationships go too. It's just like old anything holding on to, right? Old clothes, old
Hmm.
things that no longer even fit you. It doesn't because you're growing all the time. You're not staying the same. So sometimes things
Hmm.
serve you for a period of time, but it doesn't mean that it's forever. And I think people have a hard time with letting go.
Yes, I do, and I think it's something that many of us are not really confident in doing. It's a hard thing to do, and it's also really, really multifaceted and so layered. I mean, there's situations around really severe trauma where it's so complex in terms of relationships and kind of deciding where a relationship can reside in your life or if it should be there or not. And it's really tricky to figure out. I do think, of course, this won't surprise you. Therapy can be really helpful with that. But when I think about several different things that come to mind with this, sometimes I think when it comes to relationships and like where when we got to say, you know what, I don't know if this is really good for me. Sometimes they aren't relationships that we can fully get rid of for any number of reasons. There's a lot of times, we're connected to someone that we can't just not have around or can totally, you know, kind of say, I don't want to interact with this person anymore. And it has to do a lot with putting boundaries in place. And I think that that's something that's actually like so valuable. Again, that most of us didn't learn when we were kids. So we have to come back and kind of like figure out how to implement them as adults. And maybe that's saying, I can only talk to you this day and time, and that's it. And however it may look. I mean, it's kind of hard to give examples because there's so much variability with
Well,
all of it.
also, I think that
Mhm.
the fact that you brought out, the boundaries, I think that's great.
Mhm.
And I think even not answering the phone could be a boundary, right? I mean,
Yes.
anything can be a boundary. Boundaries about like, putting yourself first, and that's not selfish. That's self-care, right? And so
Mhm.
I think the boundary is just saying no or not right now, or this is not
Yes.
a good time, and
Mhm.
just being true to yourself. And I think that so many of us, we want to please, we want to,
Mhm.
we're not coming from, and we're left empty, right? Because we're always trying to
Mhm.
please, 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 please. And
Mhm.
you can't keep, without the boundaries, you're gonna get depleted.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. I totally agree. I think that especially as you were saying that, no, I was thinking like as women too. I think women are really socialized into pleasing and to putting other people's needs before yourself. And that's considered this very like a societally speaking or culturally speaking, that's a great thing, right? Like when you put your needs in front of someone else's needs in front of yours, excuse me, and then how selfless of you and how wonderful. When the reality is that to your point, like even thinking of like the airplane kind of like you have to put your own oxygen mask on before you can put someone else's on. It sounds almost, I think it's used sometimes like so much, it could almost sound cliche, but it's actually quite true. Like if you have a need, it's really, really important. And it can be any number of things. Like you said, saying, I'm not going to look at my phone at this point in time, or I'm not going to take these phone calls. Maybe it's saying in a moment, I can't tell you how much this will come up in my practice where someone will be like, I wasn't able to eat all day. Like I wasn't able to prioritize time for that. And I think, oh my goodness, like you've got to eat. Like this is really important. Like your body needs this nutrition to stay focused and to stay energized and all of these things. But I think we're so almost ingrained without even thinking of it. It's an unconscious thing to forget about our own needs sometimes and where we need space. And I think sometimes we even feel selfish that if we think about it, it's somehow bad or some bad reflection on us if we're thinking about what we might need or what we might want when we need that space. We have to take care of ourselves.
And talking about self care, I just had
Mhm.
a conversation with my son. He's 24. And I'm like, you have to move your body. You got to work out. You got to move
Mhm.
your body. You know, long time ago, we were hunter and gatherers. Today, we sit behind, a
Mhm.
lot of us behind a computer. We're not moving our body. We got to move our body. And so that's self care, right? If you're not moving your
Yeah.
body, if you're not getting out there, if you're not exercising, your body won't be able to take care of you. So it's even that relationship you have with your own body, right? Your body
Yeah.
hosts who you are. If you don't take care of that relationship, how is that going to be a long lasting, healthy relationship? So it's even simple things like that, that if we
Yes.
don't do, we're going to pay the price later. We're going to regret we didn't
Mhm.
do them when we were young or when we were
Mhm.
younger because our body gets stuck. Like over the years, the head goes forward, the shoulder goes forward. How many people do I
Mhm.
see walking with their head down, their shoulder down, with their head? I mean, literally the way they look at the phone, right? Especially this society
Mhm.
today. If we're not conscious, and again, I think it comes a lot to being conscious in your relationship with everything, right? Because if we're not conscious of what we're
Mhm.
doing, we're going to pay the price later because time goes by fast and you have right now. Right now, don't put things out off for tomorrow. That relationship you have with yourself is the most important relationship you'll ever have.
Oh, absolutely. I like the thinking about the gym for several reasons. One, it made me think of I bought some deodorant once and they included in the like package, like take care of your body. It's the only place you have to live. And I have that on my refrigerator because I love it. But it makes me think like when it comes to putting in boundaries. So generally speaking, as humans, I think we don't want to feel bad, right? Like if you touch a hot stove, you're not going to leave your hand there because it feels bad. So physically or emotionally, we don't want to feel bad. I think sometimes we have a hard time putting in boundaries because someone else will often be disappointed. And it's hard for us to tolerate their disappointment, especially if they turn that disappointment on us. And like sometimes people can make you feel bad or any number of things. I think of putting in boundaries as a lot like building a muscle. Most of us can't walk into the gym and just like bench press 100 pounds. You can't do that. You have to work up to it. It's the same with putting boundaries in place. Doing that around the space that you need, whether it's to work out, to have a few minutes to read a book that you want to read, or whatever you need space for you, is going to be like building a muscle. Adding that in a little bit, and also being able to allow someone else. If they're disappointed that you maybe are saying, I can't go out to dinner tonight with everyone. I need to be home. They're allowed to have their disappointment, and you're also allowed to stay home and take the space for yourself that you need. But we do have to build up tolerance for that. And that's an important part of the discussion. It's never just like this overnight thing. And progress often looks like this up, down, up, down, up, down. Generally speaking, we're moving up, like that's what we want, but it's never perfectly linear. And so I think those are important parts of the discussion. And sometimes I think too, we have this tendency to project betterness on other people. Like we just assume they've got this figured out and we don't. I think social media can contribute to that sometimes. And as a therapist, I can assure you that everybody doesn't have something figured out that you don't. We're all struggling actually with these same things. And we all have to build tolerance for tolerating someone else's disappointment or putting boundaries in place that we need for ourselves. And that's okay.
Yeah, and I love that because any emotion that I feel, I know that someone else is feeling it too. Like I'm not the only one
Yeah.
going through this. Maybe they're not saying they're going through this, but they've all gone through it through one time or another because we're all so interconnected. That's why
Mhm.
when we talk about certain things or certain subjects, people can so relate to each other because
Mhm.
we're all part of the human race. We're human beings going through human emotions, right? With human feelings.
Mhm.
Nobody is made out of steel, right? And
Right.
and and getting back to relationships, right?
Mhm.
and boundaries. People can make you feel bad and wrong. They can bring on the guilt, right? And
Mhm.
and even in relationship, with your significant other, I think it's very important to be conscious. Again, going back to conscious on how we
Mhm.
impact people, how we impact each other in
Yeah.
relationships, because it's so easy to do things without consciousness and then leave people hurt behind, or I just think that it's so important to be conscious of how we speak to people, how we talk to people,
Mhm.
how we interact with people. And what I've really learned lately, and with my own daughter too, is that besides empathy, also coming to people with curiosity, being curious
Yes.
about what they're going through, what's going on, rather than making everything bad and wrong, getting in their world. Again, when you were saying before, we were talking about the empathy and getting in, literally holding that child's hand and getting in his world. What if we could do
Mhm.
that in everything, even with curiosity, get in somebody's world and just notice? And I think it's in the presence, in the notice, that everything can change
Mhm.
in your life. And that's where the power is.
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh, when we can see things from someone else's perspective, there's so much that changes, I think. There's a slowing down. I think people feel so validated and understood. And you're right, I don't think we're always aware of how we're coming across. It wasn't actually until I received feedback from multiple people in various settings when in particular when I was in college, people would tell me they found me intimidating. And I remember just being like floored. I didn't feel intimidating.
Mhm.
And that certainly wasn't something that I was trying to put out, but it was something that people were picking up on me. And I think when we received the same feedback kind of over and over and over again, probably that's something that we need to pay attention to and to really think about. And it's hard to take feedback on ourselves sometimes, especially when we don't like the feedback or we don't want it to be true. But there's so much change that can happen by way of that. Even like one time I remember my sister, this is so long ago, but she's like, "Why are you snapping at me?" And I didn't think I was snapping at her, but I was snapping at her, and she was right. And the tendency in that scenario, right, is like to be want to get defensive and be like, "I'm not snapping at you." And that's what I want to do is get defensive. I think many of us do. But when we can pause and reflect on feedback that's given to us and get curious about whether or not that's true or how the other person is experiencing us, I think we can it sets the stage to not only be aware of how we're coming across, but also to repair in relationships, which is one of the most valuable things that we can learn to do is how to repair because we're gonna cause hurt sometimes and that's gonna happen in relationship and it's not realistic to think it won't happen.
So how can
What's
we how can
realistic
we
is to
repair
repair.
relation? I love that. So what are some
Yeah.
steps people can take to start? Let's say a relationship is really important to them. What are some
Mhm.
things they could do to repair a relationship? Do you have some tools you could give us?
Yeah, one of the things well, I think you hit the nail on the head just a minute ago, Noah, when you said getting curious.
Hmm.
I think that that's one of the biggest things about is a repair is like being curious about how someone else experienced you, what they're saying, and allowing that to be true. We don't, I that time where I was like snappy with my sister, and I my intent wasn't to be snappy. I didn't think I was being, but I was being that way. Like those two things were both true at the same time. The fact that my intent was not to be short with her doesn't somehow like negate the fact that she found me really short and was hurt by it. Those two things were both true and allowing space for that. It sounded like you were going to say
No,
something.
I was gonna say, yeah. So it
Mhm.
sounds like being present and then taking ownership, like you said, getting the
Yes.
feedback from your sister and taking ownership of what you did. And how important is it
Yeah.
to apologize?
It is. I think it's really important to apologize. I think a heartfelt apology isn't just like, oh my God, I'm sorry. Like, let's move on. Like that to me is just like that's annoyance. That's like can we change the topic, please? I don't want to talk about this anymore. And most of us don't want to talk about it. When we're in the wrong, we don't want to dwell on it. It doesn't feel good. But it's really important, I think, when we're thinking about apologies, is to reflect on the other person's experience and be able to say, I understand why you felt that way. I understand that I came, that this happened, that you felt hurt by what I did, and I apologize for hurting you and not adding in I didn't mean to. that starts to invalidate it. But saying, I apologize that I hurt you, or I apologize for whatever happened. It can be obviously vary from situation to situation. But to take ownership for it and not back end it with an I didn't mean to. Because that
I
does, I
like
think,
that.
really invalidate it. Hmm.
And do you think people
Yeah.
have a really hard time forgiving themselves?
Yes. Yes, I wouldn't have a job, I don't think, if people didn't have a hard time forgiving themselves, and that's where we internalize a lot of shame sometimes. That is, one of I mean, truly, in the top 3 of the hardest things to feel is shame. Shame is more than just like, "I did a bad thing and I messed up." Shame will make us feel like we are bad. And that is a hard feeling to work through and to process when we feel like we are bad or that we are wrong, and that then becomes our identity. And so I think that that's a very difficult thing to work through. I think that's also part of why we have a hard time apologizing sometimes, or acknowledging that we've hurt someone, is because we don't really want to feel shame, and that's often something that accompanies it.
So is shame, would you say that shame and guilt go together?
I think they can go together. Yes, I think that guilt is like, how would I say it? Like shame light. It's like it's all in the same kind of the same, under maybe the same umbrella. But guilt can be something that I think is easier in some ways to process through. I don't think if you're feeling guilty that you necessarily are doomed to feel shame. Um, and I think you can be, though. This is where, as kids, again, like, I wish that we all could have had like this more attuned, like this attuned parenting. A lot of times kids internalize shame really, really quickly, very quickly. If they feel like their parents are upset with them or disappointed, or their caregivers or whatever, kids will often internalize that they are bad. And that is a narrative that needs to be reworked with their parents. Ideally, their parents will come in and say, you did this bad thing and I forgive you, and you're a good kid, and it's okay. We're going to work through this, or however the parent says it. um, when we don't get that, that's when we tend to be more prone to shame, especially later in life. And it's an important thing to be able to work through, and it's often unconscious. So we've got to be able to bring these things into our conscious mind.
Yeah, I think every parent should be reading parenting books. I wish I did, you guys.
Yeah.
I wish I read a lot of parenting books. I missed that memo. But, it's okay. And it's not about beating yourself up or being shameful. The one thing that I
Hmm.
really stressed with my kids, that was really important in my house, was treat
Hmm.
people the way you want to be treated. How
Hmm.
important do you think that sentence is?
Oh, yeah. It's so, I've wondered about that lately with social media, like what an interesting thing that we're bringing in with social media, like treating people how we want to be treated, because that's changed things so much. Sometimes I think the biggest grace in my life is that I went to high school and college and all of that before social media. I was in college with Facebook, but not all this other stuff. So yeah, treating people, thinking about how we're treating other people. I think that when I think about what you just said, Noah, it made me think of something else that I've heard before, and I can't remember where I read this, but it said, "Be gentle with yourself and other people, because we're all going through life for the first time." I think if we can see people through a lens of grace and doing their best and treating people like they're doing their best, because I actually think many of us are all actually doing our very best in life. Your best is going to look different than my best, and so forth and so on, but we really are doing our best. And if we can treat people with that level of grace and keep that in mind, I think we're all so much more empathetic and kinder to one another. And I think that's important.
And that would be a beautiful world. So
Yeah.
let's talk about playing full out in your life. Why are so many of us? Because I feel like, especially if you're an introvert, if you've been
Hmm.
hurt in life, if you kind of told to shut up a lot in life or whatever it is, and you become an
Hmm.
introvert, where you're not really playing full out, you're kind of sitting on the sideline.
Hmm.
And therefore, you're not fully expressed in your life, and you're not creating the relationships with maybe as good of relationships as you want. How important is it for people to get out of their way, get uncomfortable, and fully play with others in their lives?
Yeah, I think it is. The word that came to mind as you said that was safety. People who can be on the sidelines, sometimes I think there's a safety issue at play, right? It's like when we become immobilized in one place, it's usually because we don't feel safe to venture out. I think one thing that can actually help us feel safe if we're able to get it is having a safe relationship in our lives that we feel like can almost be like a launching point for doing that, because it opens up the world so much when we're able to feel safe, or to take risks. And I think sometimes when we take a risk, we can feel more safe once we've taken that first risk, and that like enables us or helps us to make more and more, or to take more and more risks, which is so important. But identifying what you need to feel safe is really important to do that, because I think we all want to feel safe. And so is it having a person in your life that will help encourage you and support you? I mean, that does wonders. Sometimes I think we've done this thing in our society where we've like somehow communicated to people that if they're doing life on their own, that like you're somehow really successful and good for you. I don't know about you know, but I want people in my corner who are like backing me, who are saying, Deanna, you've got this. Like you can do this. Like I'm gonna be here and I'm supporting you and I'm cheering you along the way. And I think that cultivates a lot of safety to have that. And so that's one thing, thinking like relationally, especially, that I think can be so valuable for people, who struggle to kind of figure out how to take risks and where they can do so, and what they're willing to kind of, that risk tolerance, so to speak.
It's almost like when you said that, I'm like, I felt like, and we know there's coaches out there, right? But, and I'm a coach as well, and you're a therapist. But I was
Mhm,
just thinking, like, what if every person that was born was paired with a mentor, you know? Like, this is your mentor for life, you know?
mhm,
What a different world it would be, right? For people to have, because usually, it starts with our parents, as our mentors, but parents are not always great mentors, right? They do the
mhm,
best they can
absolutely.
with what they've known. And a lot of parents have not broken old cycles, have not been able to
Mhm,
reshape their lives, and there's so many people that die with regret, like I didn't play
mhm,
out, I didn't achieve this, I didn't take care of my body, I didn't eat the right foods. We can
mhm,
avoid so much by the relationship we have first with ourselves, and then having other mentors to be able to help guide us through this journey, because it is a
mhm.
complicated journey. But when you
Ah,
have the right kind of people to help you through, it can be a really empowering and beautiful journey of
mhm.
growth and transformation.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It's so important. I mean, I think therapy works. Therapy works because of the relationship that's built between the therapist and the person that they are treating. All the research shows that regardless of how the therapist practices, whether they're cognitive behavioral, family systems, whether they come from a more psychoanalytic approach like me, the reason it works is because of the relationship that's formed, because it's so important. That becomes a space of safety and a space of launching off, and we absolutely need that. Anybody does. I think anybody needs that, and everyone's, even thinking back to like the risk piece, like everyone's risk tolerance varies from person to person to some degree, but having someone to kind of, um to be that grounding relationship is so key in our lives and development as humans, and we are developing over the course of our lives, all the way and until we hopefully all die, of old age.
Yeah, and I love when you use the word launchpad, because I almost
Mhm,
see us like
mhm,
rockets, right? Just like we're on our
yeah,
launch pad when we're ready to like take off,
mhm,
Like it's
yes,
such an empowering place to be, to launch into the world in a powerful way, because as we know, life goes by fast. And if we don't, we're not aware of the time and not aware of the space and not present to how we want our life to be, it can pass you by really, really fast. And you can be stuck in a lot
mhm,
of doubts and fears and, anger and all these like disempowering negative
mhm,
emotions. And you're
mhm,
really not meant to suffer in this life. You're meant to flourish. You're meant to launch,
mhm,
right? You're meant to grow and become and open up to new opportunities, new people, new experiences that the world has to offer. The world is limitless, right? And so it's,
mhm,
how can we create that openness, that experience? And I think, having mentors, having therapists,
mhm,
having coaches, having others, right? That's why those relationships that we heal through the traumas, even the traumas, like we said, you heal through the pain with
mhm,
healing relationships. So we need the healing relationships to help us get through all the pain and suffering that we've been through in our lives.
Yes, yeah. They're so important, and to have like what we are talking about at the beginning with empathy, to have empathy present in those relationships. And one thing that I try to remind myself of a lot is, we all have a different, like, should I say just a minute ago, like our best looks different across the board. Like if you were to judge my mile time, my fastest mile time compared to like the fastest woman in my age bracket, I think my time would look pretty bad. But but if it's my best, that's what's so important. Like we all have our own shoes to fill and our own shoe size to fill. And how can we support each other in doing our best and living our best in the context of which we're going to do it? It looks so different. And we need that difference, right? Like we cannot all have a degree in medicine and be practicing neurosurgery. I think of that as a very elite profession. But if we were all doing that, what would the rest of us do? We need people like you, Noah, who are working and coaching people. We need therapists, we need teachers, we need all this stuff. And then your best in within all of that is going to look different from person to person, but embracing that for yourself and for others, whatever their best looks like, is so important.
Do you work with people through Zoom?
I do. Well, I use a HIPAA compliant platform called DoxyMe. But yes, I do video. Actually, my entire practice is telehealth.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So
Mhm.
how can people, this was really fun. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I could
Yeah,
talk
this
to
was
you all
so
day
fun.
because,
Yeah.
there's so much to uncover with relationships, and I love the work
Mhm.
that you're doing. How can people connect with you? People watch this worldwide. How can they
Yeah.
connect with you?
Well, they can find me on LinkedIn. My name will be in the description, so you can know how to spell it. But Deanna Pelley, Malpcc. So you can find me there on LinkedIn, and you can find me on Instagram at Making People Make Sense. That's like kind of my tagline for therapy, is that I help people make sense of their own mind. So making people make sense. Those are the two best ways to get a hold of me. You can message me on LinkedIn. That's one that I always get right away. Sometimes the Instagram messages get kind of they wind up in weird spots I don't always see. But LinkedIn or Instagram.
And why are you so compassionate about relationships? What really has you be a therapist and be so lit up and so wanting to make a difference for people with relationships and to step into their power?
Because I believe in our capacity for healing. I really do. I've never met anyone that's come into my practice, and I've seen a lot of people that have come in where I think, I just don't think this person can heal. I just don't think there's space for that. I believe very strongly in it. And I've had the experience of a lot of profound healing in my own life that's come by way of relationship. We're created for it. Like we have to have relationships in our lives. And the people that I love the most in this world and trust the most are the people that I trust with my heart, to have my heart to see all of me and know all of me and love me through it. And that's such a healing experience for me, that it's such a privilege to be able to bring that forth, whether it's in other personal relationships in my life or in my practice as a therapist.
I love that you said that. Thank you so much. And
Mhm.
the heart
Yeah, thanks,
relationships, right?
Noah.
The heart-centered
Hmm.
relationships, right? We all need to have
Hmm.
heart-centered relationships in our lives. Thank you so
Yes.
much, Diona. This was a great
Hmm.
conversation. I look forward to
Thanks,
having
Noah.
many more with you. Thank
Yes.
you so much for joining me today at the World Healing Tour podcast. Until next time, remember to have a grateful heart, to ground in love and compassion, and every day know that you're not alone in this world. You're always guided by God. Have a beautiful day, everyone. Namaste.